Hello and welcome to MKF 2131 Marketing Decision Analysis. Now this is the third week of our lecture where we are continuing the market share journey, where in this case we are really going to touch on the market share and we are going to do some calculation as well. Now in the last week's video we have talked about matrix and also models, where we introduce you to what are matrix, what are models, how do they actually use in marketing. At the same time, we have talked about matrix being something that we have touched on in scale properties in week 1, whereby in scale properties, there are 4 different properties. So the first one is nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. So if you think about matrix, they are all interval or ratio. They are considered as matrix. And in models, we have touched on different models. So for example, we talked about what factors that affects your marks. So some of you might say, because I study hard, I listened to David's lecture, I didn't come late to exams. We have touched on hierarchy of effects, the awareness, attitude, usage matrix. And lastly, we talked about Net Promoter Score, whereby we did some calculation and also the formula of Net Promoter Score, which is the percentage of promoters minus the percentage of detractors. Now this week we are moving on to market share, and we want to find out whether market share is actually pretty good as a measure of performance or not, and what are some of the drivers of market share. How to calculate market share, that's the most important, I guess. And after you calculate market share, then the next thing is how would you think about presenting this to a manager. So let's say you did all these calculations, you did all this hard work, and how would you present to managers? Now, I think this is the most important or crucial aspects of all the marketing analytics, because people are so bombarded with the statistics, with the numbers. Now, at the end of the day, you have to be able to present this into a very simple, non-jargon words, such that general people will understand. And this is where we're going to train you in terms of the managerial implication, whereby how you're going to turn something that is so statistical, something that is so quantitative, into something that is actionable, that's something that people understand. Not just people, but the general people. Lastly, we're going to look at what are some of the drawbacks of market share. Now, if you look at the introduction to market share are typically just a share. What do I mean by that? Let me just give you an example. So let's say if you're eating pizza with your friend, okay? So I love pizza, so I'm gonna use that as the example for today. So let's say you ate 3 slices out of, let's say your friend ate 6. So this is you. Okay, I'm gonna put smiley face here. And friend. Now, your friend is eating 6 slices of pizza while you just ate 3 slices. So if you convert this to a share of how much you actually ate, so you ate 3 out of the total slices possible, which is 9. So in the way that you ate 1/3 of the pizza. So this is converted into 33.333%. So it's just recurring 3. So you can say about 33%, okay? Let's just make it a whole number. Now your friend ate 6 slices. So in this case, it's 6 out of 9. So it's 2/3. And this is going to be 66.6666 ... Okay, it's just continuing or recurring 6. So this will give you 67%. And if you total up these two, 33 plus 67%, that will give you your 100%, which is your whole pie. If you think about it, this is what technically a market share is. So you can calculate market share by unit. I just did that by unit. So this is an example of unit. All right. Or it could be in terms of revenue. So say that in a family, you bring in $10 a day, and let's say your dad, let's say, brings $1,000 a day. Let's say your mom is bringing $200 a day. Okay, so you can convert this into market share technically on how much money that you actually bring into the family, how much dad is bringing to the family, and how much mom is bringing to the family. So if you total this up, so it becomes 1,210, and your share or market, or technically a market share, is 10 out of 1,210, right? Which is very, very small. Okay, so I don't know how much is this, so you can calculate that with your calculators. But and you can also calculate how much your dad is bringing to the table and how much your mom is bringing to the table as well. So your dad will be 1,000 divided by 1,210, right? So you can type that into your calculator. Your mom is 200, so I'm just gonna put it here, divided by 1,210. So that's technically what market share is all about. It can be in terms of unit, or it can be in terms of revenue. Just want to give you a brief idea of what's that. So market share can be in terms of units. So if you're doing it in terms of units, so it'll be unit divided by total. So unit sales divided by total sales. Or it can be revenue, whereby it can be sales revenue divided by total revenue. Now, market share is critically depends on market definition. And you can later on see an example whereby it is going to be changed depending on what definition that you actually made into your equation. And market definitions should be relevant to your objective as well. If you think about cars, Mercedes. So if you look the table on the left, this is just market share of the general Alright, so general automotive, so general car brands. So you have General Motors or GM, you have Toyota, Ford, and so on. So if you look at Mercedes, it was not even here. It was probably less than Tesla, 1 point something. So Mercedes was actually below 1%. So if you look at Mercedes here, it's actually below 1.15%, just below. But if you look at market share of luxury cars, so if you're looking at luxury cars, then the whole ball games is going to change in such a way that Mercedes now come third. So what can you conclude from here? Mercedes should not be competing into a general automotive industry when you are defining your market share. It should be relevant on the luxury car brands, because if you think about it, Toyota are not really competing with Mercedes because they are competing with different segments. Now, don't get me wrong, because Toyota owns Lexus, so Lexus do compete with Mercedes, but not Toyota. So just remember that. So because of that, market share has to be defined at the market that you are actually competing. So if you're competing on the higher end product, then obviously market share has to be counted on the whole luxury brand. Same things. So if you think about Hilton, and if you think about Marriott, those type of the hotels, they are competing with the 5-star luxury brands. They are not competing with, let's say, the 3 stars like Best Westerns, or they are not competing with Novotel, because Novotel is at the lower level as the 5-star hotel. So make sure whenever you are defining your market share, you need to be relevant with what objective that you have, and also the competitive environment. So we look at Mercedes just now. And lastly, too broad market definition may dilute the focus and may lead to unrealistic goals. And at the same time, too narrow focus may lead to missed opportunities. Now I'm going to give you an example. Mount Franklin. Now, let's say Mount Franklin, they are competing with all the beverages industry. Now, as you know, the beverages industry are probably, you have all these giants like Coke and Pepsi. If Mount Franklin are competing with Coke and with Pepsi, then obviously that's too broad, because as you know, probably most of the market share are eaten up by Coke or by Pepsi. So obviously then, and it becomes an unrealistic goal, and you probably demise yourself in such a way that you look so small in the market. But at the same time, too narrow may also lead to missed opportunities. So for example, let's say now you're defining Mount Franklin as the only water that has the pink bottle cap. Now, probably you're the only one, and you thought about, oh yay, I mean, I'm getting the 100% of the market. Great. But I mean, is that realistic, to be honest? Having a market share that has a pink water. So I would say that that's too narrow focus. And because of that, then you might think other competitors too lightly. And that's not a perfect way, because again, you cannot be too complacent in the market. If you remember the example of Apple and Nokia. If you think about Nokia, it used to be the giant phone manufacturers on earth, whereby no one can kill the market share of Nokia. But what happened after introduction of Apple? When they released their first iPhone, it just killed the market completely, whereby they never thought about having a phone without a button actually works. So that's why I said you cannot be too complacent in the market. So that's all for market share. We have touched on the introduction to market share, and we went through some of the simple calculations of market share. Now in the next video, we're going to look at the relative price index. So stay tuned for the next video.